In the chair today is Professor Ed Borodzicz. Edward has a long association with the college going back more than 20 years. Today he's Professor of Risk and Crisis Management at the Portsmouth Business School. Edward, your lecture at the college this week is entitled "The Operation Was a Success, but the Patient Died." What do you mean by that?
It's a term that one often hears from medicine, where medical procedures are carried out, and the medical procedure is carried out exactly in accordance with recommendations, but unfortunately the outcome of the procedure is not successful. What I'm meaning by that in the context of this evening is really looking at the wider aspects of risk management and response to crisis management in the current climate of austerity, the current climate of changing society, the current climate of looking at how we can do things more efficiently, get better outcomes, and have less things going wrong.
So what you're saying is a lot of investment in risk management is simply not effective?
Correct.
And where would that money be better spent in your view?
It would be better spent either on management, either better management. Often risk management fails because management itself is extremely poor, or it could be better spent on building a capability to respond to crisis events when they happen, rather than a naive assumption that we can prevent them all by good risk management.
Can you illustrate that in terms of a crisis that we might be familiar with? I mean, let's just pick out the recent floods, for instance.
Okay. I mean, the floods are a very interesting example in point. We have spent an absolute fortune trying to prevent the types of events that we're seeing on our TV screens almost daily at the moment. And while some of that has worked, I mean, it's undeniable. There are houses that are not flooded today that would be if we hadn't put flood prevention procedures in place. There are entire communities that are able to watch the water bypass them quite safely, but we see large amounts of land that are flooded. Often there are people in very distressed states in those areas, and our ability to respond seems very compromised indeed. We seem to be very slow. We're unable to get the right resources to the right people quickly. Maybe we would have been better trying to either make their houses better able to withstand a flood, or simply build a better procedure in order to respond to flooding when it actually occurs, rather than a naive assumption that we can prevent all flooding.
So it appears we've got the balance wrong between prevention and response.
Yes.
How do you think we've got into this position?
I think we've got, it's a long and complex process. I think we've partly got into this position through looking at management practices and constantly striving to improve them. So quite innocently, we tried to make things better. I'm going back now 40 years, 50 years. When we look at major failures in systems, in organisations, in any sphere of our life, obviously when things go wrong, people want to know why they went wrong and try to learn from that and improve things. So there's a natural assumption there that one needs to build procedures in place as a result of that to make sure this sort of thing happens again. When I started doing my research, I started originally looking at public inquiries. And it's quite interesting when you look at public inquiries and you look at the remit of public inquiries, which are very expensive bodies that are given a lot of money by governments. One of the first things they always say is that one of their primary objectives is to put in place procedures to make sure this kind of thing can never happen again. And I can only tell you about the floods that we're experiencing today. Well, had we put those procedures in place after 1928, after 1947, after 2007, will we put them in place after today? I doubt we can.
But there's a whole industry grown up around risk management.
Absolutely, yes.
I imagine there are people within that industry who might be listening to you now saying that you aren't giving sufficient credence to their achievements. The fact that clearly they are successful. We don't hear about their successes. We don't hear about the things that they avert.
I mean, clearly, some risk management is essential. This is where a debate needs to take place. Clearly, those who are in the industry of selling risk management are not going to be terribly pleased with the idea that we should do a bit less of what they're selling and a bit more of something else. And I apologise for that, but I can't change it. But there needs to be a rebalancing of the way we approach risk, in the sense that we need to understand that risk, while we can do so much to practically minimise its impact, we can never take it out of the system altogether. There's been a whole bunch of research done in the academic world, both in the scientific side and also on the social science side. And what we see amongst all of that research is that you can produce reductions in the outcomes of negative events. But the outcome of going through that process will either not screen everything out, or what it doesn't screen out will be so complicated it'll be extremely nasty to respond to. Or we're simply transferring the risk into something else, because it's a natural human characteristic that we seem to like to live with a certain amount of risk. And if we stop one particular kind of risk, we seem to create another one somewhere else.
You know, and there's something here too about the litigation culture in which we live now. There seem, you know, lawyers make a hell of a lot of money out of actions taken against people who they believe are responsible for the event or the crisis or whatever. What do you have to say to them?
I think the legal establishment has some blame here, and it is an industry in itself. When you talk of the risk industry, the legal establishment is part of that risk industry. And one of the problems, I think, with risk and liability is that we need to be clear as to whether people have done enough to prevent something, or merely done something ironically, what happens is if someone actually does what it says in the rule book, they can defend themselves quite adequately in court and say, I've done everything I'm supposed to do, sadly the patient died. If people go beyond that level, they're actually putting themselves in danger, because if it doesn't work, they might then be criticised by the legal establishment for having not followed the procedures. And one of the ironies of responding to crisis events and responding effectively to crisis events is frequently requires a changing of the rules on the day when the crisis is actually managed.
I'm sure you're not a lone voice in this debate. I'm sure you've got many people who
there are one or two
agree
others.
with you. Yes, absolutely. But what do we need to do, in your view, to turn this round now?
I think we need to engage in a debate, and I mean this college is uniquely placed to bring that sort of debate about. I think we need to have a debate between politicians, between key members of society, and also with the media, people like yourselves. We need to get people to think about what does risk actually mean to them, and to what extent am I prepared to accept certain risks as a trade-off for expecting a better response when things go wrong. Or am I going to go down this road of I want everything stopped, but then when things go wrong we don't really have any resources left to respond, which is the situation we find ourselves in today, that we have thousands of people up and down the country who are up to their waist in water and really don't know what they're going to do next. It's really quite sad.
Edward, I began this conversation by referring to your association with the college over 20 odd years, but there's something more concrete in place now, isn't there? You have this relationship between the business school and the university in Portsmouth and the college. Do you want to take this opportunity to tell us a bit about how that works?
My association over the last 20 years has been a very fruitful one for me, and it's been a great pleasure to be able to link the college up with some of the academic work that we've been doing at the university. We have a very successful Masters in Risk, Crisis and Resilience at Portsmouth Business School. We also have 2 other Masters programmes in the university as well. And what we've done is we've been able to accredit the units on those courses against the teaching that's done here at the college. It means now that students are able to come to both organisations as part of their studies, get exposed to the facilities here, and also at the same time get the academic tuition and theoretical work which the university is very well situated to put out. We're located at other ends of the country, but that just makes it all more exciting for everyone involved. But then the college also does teaching in other locations as well. So I think this is a very exciting time, because particularly for me and for my university, I think it's wonderful to be working with a government agency like this.
And I'm told that points earned not just in courses this year, but historically, over the last 3 or 4 years.
Yes, we go back 5 years.
Can count towards the credits.
Yes, we'll accept credits from 5 years ago against our programme. You still have to take our assessments, mind you.
Thank you very much for joining us.
Very
it's
welcome.
been a pleasure.
Thank you very much.